You realize you've matured, when silence starts to speak louder than your urge to be right, when what used to make you chase after someone now only makes you want to distance yourself. You don't know exactly when that changed. You just know that it has. You still remember the feeling of wanting to be chosen, the desperation to keep someone by your side, even knowing that it was destroying you inside. The fear of loneliness was so overwhelming that you confused crumbs with affection. You called it love when it was only draining your energy. And now, it's different. You no longer feel the urgency to convince anyone of your worth. Nor do you have to, because something inside you has finally stabilized. It wasn't a complete healing. It wasn't a miracle that happened overnight. It was a sacred exhaustion, an emotional burnout that pushed you toward a new kind of peace. You didn't want to win anymore. You just wanted to rest. And in the midst of that silence, you realized you were being reborn. Not in the beautiful sense of cliché phrases, but in the raw sense of someone who decided it's no longer worth sacrificing for those who don't recognize how much you give. You no longer want conversations that turn into arguments. You don't want that cycle of break up, get back together, beg, cry anymore. The drama wears you out. The intensity drains you. The painful passion repels you. Because you realize that true love is calm. It's when you no longer need to explain yourself all the time, when you no longer have to diminish yourself to fit into what the other person can handle feeling. And then everything changes. You no longer ask if the person is coming back. You don't wait for a message that doesn't come. You no longer idealize someone who has always given you so little. You look and simply notice. You realize that loving yourself hurts less than insisting. You realize that love wasn't yours. It was an attachment disguised as hope. Maturing is realizing that you no longer negotiate your own peace just to fit into someone else's heart, someone who doesn't even know what they want from life. You felt that, didn't you? The exact moment you chose to sleep in peace rather than argue late into the night over yet another inconsistency. The instant when an absence turned into relief and no longer into longing. The day you stopped responding, not out of pride but out of self-compassion. That moment when instead of chasing after someone, you took a deep breath and chose to stay. Stay with yourself, stay in your own space, stay in peace. There's no noise, no fireworks, and none of that adrenaline rush from a conquest. But there is a clarity so profound that it changes everything. You realize you've grown when you no longer feel the need to prove anything. Not to the person who left you, not to the world that demanded you to be stronger than you were. Not to yourself, who for so long required perfection to avoid being abandoned. You've matured, not because you stopped feeling, but because you started to feel with more discernment. Now you see the signs, you hear the silences, you read between the lines. You're no longer satisfied with "I'm sorry." You want change. You no longer fall for pretty words. You want actions. You don't need the other person to feel whole. You want genuine presence, including your own. And because of this, you no longer accept halves. You've learned to recognize the emptiness, to see how much you forced connections that weren't meant to happen, to understand how much you begged for emotional crumbs thinking it was love. And when you start to realize all of this, something within you becomes non-negotiable. Your peace, your stability, your own time. That's when people start to notice you've changed. Yes, you've changed. Because before you accepted little to avoid losing anyone. Now you'd rather lose anyone. As long as you don't lose yourself, you're no longer attracted to those who confuse you. Now you're drawn to those who bring you clarity. You don't seek out those who disappear. You look for those who stay, without you having to beg. What if staying means hurting yourself? It's no longer worth it. Because you've understood that emotional maturity isn't about tolerating everything. It's about knowing what should never be tolerated. And that's when you start to say no. No to that ex who comes back as if nothing happened. No to that empty message at 2 a.m. No to that invitation disguised as affection, but which deep down just wants to keep you around without any real commitment. You look and say, "No, this is no longer for me." Without anger, without a speech, without revenge, just an internal silence from someone who knows they weren't born to live on the edge of almost. You were born to be whole, and maybe you realized this late, but you realized. If this has happened to you, comment. I needed to hear this. And now that you're at this point, with more clarity than neediness, life starts to test your choice. Distractions appear, people from the past, old proposals wrapped in new packaging, all to see if you'll still fall, all to see if you've learned. And that's when you show who you've become, not with words, with decisions, with absences, with the firmness of someone who knows they don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. You've hidden behind the fear of being alone for too long. But now you realize that true loneliness is to be accompanied and feel empty. You no longer want company. You want connection. You no longer want physical presence. You want souls intertwined. And you know, it's precisely when you begin to vibrate like this, with this kind of awareness, that the universe reorganizes everything around you. You no longer attract what destroys you. You repel what has already hurt you, not because you hate it, but because you've already understood, you recognized. You've healed enough not to repeat. And it's at this point that you start to choose your peace, without needing to notify anyone, without making a scene, without justification. You simply withdraw from relationships that don't add to you. You step back from conversations that lead you nowhere. You withdraw from situations that make you unwell, not as an escape, but as a choice. A choice made by someone who has cried too much trying to be accepted. A choice made by someone who has tried everything and understood that the problem was never about giving too much of herself, but rather about not learning when to stop. Today you know, your limit is the exact point where your peace begins to be threatened. Beyond that, there's no negotiation, no more insisting, no more illusion that one day he'll change. If he changes, let it be on his own. If he returns, let him find a different version of you. Stronger, calmer, more whole. The one who no longer needs to beg for love to feel alive. You realize you've matured. When you understand that your silence has more power than all the words you've ever shouted to be heard. You notice, when you finally notice. And if at this moment you're there, in that exact spot between "it still hurts" and "I've understood," know this. It's part of the process. Don't rush. You don't need to prove you've moved on. You just need to continue being true to this new truth that is being born within you. And that truth has a name: self-care. If this has made sense to you so far, write yes below. That part of you that implored for love still exists, but now she has someone who protects her, you. And this reconnection with your own soul is priceless. But there's still more to say. There are still more layers to unravel, because what you are experiencing now is just the beginning of your internal transformation. True emotional liberation doesn't come when you forget the other person. It comes when you finally choose yourself. And in this process of choosing yourself, you will lose a lot. You will lose the idea of happily ever after. You will lose the naivety of thinking that love is enough. You will lose the habit of negating yourself for those who don't value you. But you will gain something that no one can take away: peace, clarity, self-mastery. It's such a sharp perception that no one will be able to fool you with sweet words and empty gestures anymore. You'll notice it in their eyes, in their tone of voice, in their response time, in the way they touch you. You'll feel it in your body, when something no longer resonates with who you've become. And this perception, this ability to notice, will become your greatest protection. You won't need to run away anymore, because nothing will be able to hold you back. And if someone wants to stay, they'll need to love at the same level of awareness that you have reached, because there's a part that no one tells you. What happens after you choose peace? What happens after you decide to stop chasing? What no one talks about, and is that at first it hurts. It hurts as if you're betraying your own heart, as if you're giving up, as if you're being cold, because you've learned your whole life that love is about persistence, that those who love never give up, that fighting for someone else is a virtue, but you've started to realize that you were fighting alone, and when only one person is fighting, it's no longer love. It's sacrifice. It hurts because it feels like you're letting go. But little by little, you'll understand. You're not letting go of a love. You're letting go of a pattern of abandonment, of dependency, of emotional confusion. You're letting go of a story that only exists when you forget yourself. And that's when the grief begins. the grief of expectations, the grief of the image you created of the person, the grief of the idea that this time will be different. You spend nights wondering if you did the right thing. You reread old messages as if you could find in them a justification to go back. You imagine that maybe you exaggerated, but deep down, something is holding you, something new, that you don't fully understand yet, but you know is stronger than before. Maybe it's self-love, maybe it's maturity, or maybe it's the increasingly clear realization that you deserve a love that doesn't make you doubt yourself. Hey there. As the days go by, you start to notice something else. Peace begins to fill the spaces where anxiety once resided. Your breathing becomes lighter, your mind clearer, you start sleeping better, you begin to smile for no reason. You start to recognize yourself in the mirror, without that lost look of someone who wondered, what more do I need to do to be loved? You realize that you don't need to do anything besides simply be yourself. And this realization changes everything. You return to doing things you put aside. You start listening to songs that used to hurt, but now set you free. You begin to care for your body with tenderness, not for aesthetics, but for presence. You laugh at silly things and it surprises you, because for so long, you believed you could only be happy next to someone. Now, you are happy in your own company. And this is the start of a new era, an era where you don't romanticize absences. You don't idolize those who treated you like an option. You no longer wait for someone to change so you can be happy. You live. And by living, you start attracting other experiences, new encounters, new connections. But this time, you don't lose yourself so easily anymore. You can feel when the connection is genuine. You notice when you're being seen, not just desired. You differentiate between those who genuinely want to be with you and those who just want to use your warmth to heal their own wounds. You feel, you recognize. And then, everything becomes simpler. You no longer need to protect yourself with armor. Because your truth is your defense, you don't need to attack. Because your silence says enough, you don't need to prove anything. Because your presence is already a statement. And the more you establish yourself in this internal space, the more evident you become to the world as to who you really are. A woman who doesn't sell herself for attention, who doesn't dissolve out of need, who doesn't give herself without reciprocity. You have become someone who loves but doesn't cancel herself out, who embraces but doesn't carry the weight. What you feel but doesn't bleed inside anymore every time someone leaves. And that scares a lot of people. It scares those who got used to your fragility. It scares those who took advantage of your neediness. It even scares you sometime when you can't believe how much you've grown, but you've grown. And now in this new time, your compass has changed. What attracts you now is no longer looks, presence, or promises. It's peace, it's emotional stability, it's emotional maturity. It's someone who knows how to love consciously, not impulsively. And if that someone doesn't appear, that's okay, because the most important thing is already here. You. You are now your own home, your own foundation, your own reference for love. That doesn't mean it won't hurt anymore. It means that even when it hurts, you won't abandon yourself. And that's the real love you've always been searching for. The love that begins with you. If you've already experienced this process, drop a heart down below. But I know there's something inside you that still wants to be said. There's a part of you, that still wonders, will I ever be loved the way I deserve? And I answer you, yes, but not like before. No longer being half, no longer settling for less. The love you deserve will only come when you are whole. And ironically, it's when you become whole that you no longer need it to arrive. You no longer depend on it. You no longer wait for it. You simply live, and by living you attract it. But no longer in a hurry, no longer in despair, now with awareness. Have you noticed this? The difference between wanting and needing. You can want someone, but you no longer need anyone to feel alive. That changes everything. Because now if someone comes, it'll be a bonus, not a necessity. It will be addition, not salvation. It will be a partnership, not desperation. And that time is freedom. You are becoming free. Free from emotional dependency. Free from the illusion that you need to be chosen to be worth something. Free from the pattern of unstable relationships. And all freedom is scary at first, but then it becomes your new home, and that home is you. Have you noticed how much you've grown? Have you realized how much it has cost you? So honor that journey. Don't go back, don't retreat, don't negotiate with what has already hurt you. You're not being radical, you're being fair to your own story. And that fairness is the bare minimum you deserve. But there's more. There's still a version of you waiting to be born on the other side of this process. A lighter version, wiser, more whole. And this version will only emerge when you keep choosing your peace, even when everything around you says otherwise, even when the craving screams, even when the nostalgia tightens, even when that old voice tries to convince you that maybe it's worth trying again. No, you've tried enough. Now it's time to receive, to embrace, to allow life to show you what it's like to live without the burden of feeling insufficient all the time. This is your time. Don't let anyone confuse you. Don't betray yourself out of longing. Don't go back out of fear. The peace you chose will flourish, but only if you remain steadfast. And maybe now, everything inside you feels calmer, not silent. Calm, as if finally the noise of craving has made way for something deeper. Presence. You still feel, of course. Sometimes you still wake up longing for something that never truly existed. Sometimes the urge to write, to call, to explain yourself hits hard. But you breathe and choose to let it pass because now you know feelings pass. Your peace must not pass. And this is what differentiates those who are healing from those who are still repeating patterns. You no longer seek blame. You no longer need a perfect ending. You only want truth. And when that truth settles within you, everything changes. You stop waiting and start to build yourself. Each day a little bit stronger, each night a little bit lighter. You stop being a hostage to others and become responsible for yourself. You stop begging for love and start to recognize those who can truly love you. With presence, with consistency, with awareness. It's in this place that everything blooms, including love. But now it needs to have deep roots to touch your soul. The surface no longer convinces you, because you've learned that choosing your peace was never coldness. It was love for yourself. And if this resonates with you, don't keep this conversation to yourself. Share in the comments, when was the moment you realized you had matured? Or simply comment, I choose my peace, if that phrase echoes what you felt while reading each line. And if this message struck a chord within you, if it helped you name what you're experiencing, give it a like. It's the simplest way to show that this content reached you at the right time. And more, subscribe to the channel now, because this conversation doesn't end here. We're still going deeper. There's so much more that hasn't been said that you might need to hear. Click to subscribe, because the next video will challenge your choices even more. Now it's up to you, you've noticed. Now decide whether you want to go back to what hurt you or keep moving forward, even with a heavy heart, towards a love that doesn't ask you to forget yourself. If this touched you, comment, leave a like, and meet me in the next video. I'll see you there.